Welcome to Powered by Instinct, a podcast for professionals who think about how your fundamental nature drives performance. In each episode, Kolbe experts will interview top performers, team leaders, consultants, and coaches to discuss identifying team member strengths, aligning those strengths with their jobs, and optimizing individual and team performance. If you're interested in getting more done more naturally, then let's jump in.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Powered by Instinct, Kolbe Corp's podcast, blog, etc. I'm David Kolbe, CEO and visionary of Kolbe Corp. Happy to be here today with Stefan Wissenbach. Stefan, thank you for being here. Stefan is the CEO of Engagement Multiplier, and we will talk lots more about what that means. A sneak preview is it's been an invaluable tool for us here at Kolbe Corp, so that's one of the main reasons I wanted to get him on here. The other reason is because of what he does and his company does. He's got great insight into what's going on in the world of business, what's going on in the world of people in business, which is I think a bigger issue than ever coming out of the pandemic. You know, lots of changes were forced on us, and folks, they're not done. So we're going to need to all figure out what that means. The other reason to have him on is he's just a really interesting guy. Stefan and I have known each other now for a few years. We've had bunches of chats like this and in person. So Stefan, welcome. Great to see you. So you are an initiating quick start. So for most of the listeners here, you know the Kolbe A Index results. So Stefan's MO 5492. So amazing energy around your 9 and quick start to come up with new ideas, innovations, stuff that people haven't thought of before. You back that up though with the fact finder that asks pertinent questions. You don't, go deep and deep and deep. You don't burden yourself with having to become a huge expert in everything. But you know what, I should wait. We should do that kind of toward the end of the show. And as a reminder for everybody else, I'm an 8273. So Stefan and I share the initiation in quick start and also the counteract in implementer. But in fact finder and follow through, we complement each other a little bit. We're not radically different, but I think you guys will see that with our quick starts. We'll be jumping around a little bit. Also with our follow throughs, we have not planned this out. This is not scripted. This is what's interesting. Where are we going to go? So Stefan, I guess let's just start out. Why don't you tell people how you got kind of where you are? I mean, now you're CEO and founder of Engagement Multiplier, but what was your business journey to get there?
Yeah, great question. So for almost 30 years now, I've been working with business leaders, entrepreneurs and their teams on the topic of engagement before it became fashionable and before it became a really hot topic in business where the world suddenly woke up to the fact that you need to engage your teams. So way back, if we go way back, a lot of consulting, pre-digital, manual scorecards. I fundamentally believe that what gets measured can be improved. And so we ended up about 7-8 years ago now, digitizing what we've been doing for over 20 years and creating a communication and engagement ecosystem effectively using technology that enables any business anywhere in the world to ask the right questions. And we'll talk about that a bit later because that's very important. And then understand the truth about how their employees really feel. And as we've moved into something I was talking about before the pandemic, didn't expect it to happen this quickly, but we were talking about the era of belonging, which is now upon us because we were all locked in our homes for too long. We're finding now that organizations fundamentally really do need to have a real handle on how their employees feel, because if you don't, then you're not going to win the war for talent. So that's sort of a potted history, analog business to digital business.
So what was the spark for you that had you go from, where were you before you founded Engagement Multiplier? What were you doing?
So fundamentally consultancy, working with successful entrepreneurs. And it was as a result of Dan Sullivan. I mean, we met through Strategic Coach, and Dan and Babs have become dear friends over the years. And I was at a Strategic Coach workshop many years ago, and I was actually sat next to a chap called Peter Diamandis, who I know you know. And he asked me what my MTP was, which is your massive transformational purpose. And I didn't have one. So I spent some time thinking about it. And I decided that it was 100 million people measurably more engaged, and realized that I wasn't going to do that through consulting. And so that led to thinking about how could that be true, realizing that we would need to take advantage of the power of technology in order to reach a far broader audience. So that was how it got born. So really credit to Dan Sullivan and the team at Strategic Coach, because I'm very confident that if I hadn't been a member of that program, a fabulous community, that I wouldn't have come up with the idea and I wouldn't be running the business that I'm running today.
So it was kind of a light bulb moment for you. I mean, it was a very distinct, you were there, Peter asked you that question and you like, oh my gosh, yeah, I need that, and came up with it.
Yeah. And how do we take, I actually remember it was Jane and I were talking. Jane I've worked with for years. She's fabulous. And Jane and I were talking about our conversation today a little earlier and about my 9 quick start. And she said, I remember sat in the reception area of that Peninsula Hotel in Chicago just before the pandemic. I'd just completed my 97th visit to Chicago. And it was there where we were looking at our scorecard that we were using with clients for them to understand how their team members felt about their business and how connected they were and how engaged they were. And it was there, sat around the table with my business partner, Todd, that we sort of had this sudden aha moment that this is what we need to be doing. We need to digitize what we're doing here and make it available to a very broad audience, and then started a journey which has led us to where we are today.
So describe for the audience, I know it well because we've used it for a bunch of years now, but describe for your audience what that digitization does. Like you talked about what gets measured can be improved. And I always say what gets measured gets done. What does it measure? How does it work?
It's a great question. So I've always found it really odd that, and certainly with Colby, and we must be singing off the same hymn sheet here, but if you look at what conventionally gets measured in business, we spend a huge amount of time in business measuring financial performance, and we've all got accountants and we've done that to death, right? With management accounts, we measure everything when it comes to the financials. And also if we're doing any marketing, we're very clear on measuring stats. And in hospitality, we spend a lot of time, hospitality profession for many years has spent a huge amount of time focusing on measuring the guest experience, right? But not enough time, in my opinion, on measuring the employee experience. And yet, without a great employee experience, there is no great customer experience, right? And we're finding that now with organizations seeing that employees are leaving them in droves because the people that left the businesses or went to work at home in lockdown, when they came back, they weren't the same people. They were the same physical people, but they weren't the same people in terms of the way that they think and what's important to them. So I think the world's waking up to now, and those that don't will have a hard time, how important it is to actually not only measure the employee experience, but understand the truth about how your employees truly feel in the workplace or how they feel within your organization. And what Engagement Multiplier does is it provides a communication, which is very important, and engagement ecosystem, which enables a leadership team in less than 10 minutes every typically 90 days to understand through a confidential, anonymous exchange of information with employees how they really feel and how they're scoring key elements of the organization. So how connected are they to the business in general? How connected are they to your purpose? How connected are they and how engaged are they by their leadership, their management? How engaged do they feel that their colleagues are, and how engaged do they feel personally? And it's interesting, we've built some and refined a series of algorithms around some very straightforward questions that can be answered from white collar through to blue collar very, very easily. And what it does is it gives a business, a bit like a fighter pilot's dashboard, really clear understanding of where the hotspots are. The way we like to describe it is that when you understand the truth about what's really going on in your business and how your employees really think and feel, there's only ever one of two types of opportunities. And I know we've spoken about the power of mindset several times, David, especially since my personal tragedy, but mindset is everything. And when you're looking at this data in your business, it's important to have the right mindset, which is there's only one of two opportunities. There's an opportunity to correct a misunderstanding. And trust me, that happens a lot, right? What your employees are thinking right now isn't necessarily what you would like them to think. It's not necessarily the truth because they've just misunderstood something, and easy to correct, by the way. And the second one is an opportunity to acknowledge, notice I didn't say address, but acknowledge a genuine issue within the business. And within businesses, we do have genuine issues in any company, no matter how engaged and successful you are. And quite often just having that open dialogue with team members by acknowledging these issues exist, but being open about the fact we can't do everything in one day and we can't do everything in this next quarter, but we're going to prioritize and focus on what's most important. And then communicating on an ongoing basis with team members just raises the engagement level. And just to sort of round out on this, we're in the era of belonging. People want to feel part of something. It's right in the middle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you remove it, people are just there for a paycheck. Those are the employees you're going to lose. But when you have it, self-actualization and everything else are built on belonging. So to create a sense of belonging, being open with your team and communicating with them about the organization and their perception on it and what you're doing and everything else is fundamental. They need to feel part of that journey. And when you get that right, it's magical.
So what trends are you seeing kind of post-pandemic and entering whatever phase we're going to call this? It's got to have its own name other than just post-pandemic. But with engagement and belonging, are people feeling more connected, less connected to their business? Where are we now?
So what I'm seeing, and it's a shame really, what I'm seeing that a lot of business leaders have lost sight of the fundamentals. And I don't know whether it's because we've gone through a pandemic and we're sort of a little bit overwhelmed and reacting to everything that's going on in our worlds right now. But I've just come back from talking to some very successful hoteliers in North Carolina, and we were having this topic about how do you create engagement energy in your business, because we know that if you don't have what I'm calling the ABC, just to keep this simple, alignment, belonging, and clarity. Those are the three fundamentals. Now, this isn't new, right? So anyone listening to this today is like, well, Stefan's talking about alignment, belonging, and clarity. Yes, those are old. They are old. They've been spoken about for decades. But I think it's a time for business owners and leaders to take a really hard and honest look at whether or not, and the extent to which they're creating alignment, belonging, and clarity within their business. And just very quickly, what I mean by that is alignment is a shared vision that the employees connect with, values that help drive behaviors, who you hire, how you run your business, what are the values that are important to your organization, and then what's the purpose, what is the why you're giving your employees for showing up, and are you giving them a why, and do they connect with it? So that's alignment. If you have vision, values, purpose, and employees not just having them, it's measuring how connected your team are to them. Don't assume, because we're finding consistently, if you're measuring against that, you can see where the gaps are, and there are gaps in every organization. Secondly, what are you doing about belonging? Because it occurred to me in the middle of the pandemic, I was on belonging before it sort of became where it is now, but I'm thinking, what's the simple construct? Because there's a lot of these topics sometimes seem a little bit woo-woo. So what is the structure or framework that we could use to help an organization create belonging? And it occurred to me that you can't belong where you don't feel cared for. And you can't feel cared for if you don't believe that your feelings are important. So we've created a structure, and I'll perhaps come on to it later, that we're actually going to be sharing with attendees for the podcast here. We've got a guide that you can download that will give you the tools to do this. So it's very powerful. It's called a people charter. So maybe talk about that later. But and then the third thing is clarity. More than ever now, especially with us working from home or hybrid working models, what you miss out, they make up. Remember that. So how good a job are you doing at communicating with clarity with your employees? And importantly, how much listening are you doing? Because one of my early mentors said, 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in proportion. And I think a lot of organizations at the moment are not listening enough. And I think we're seeing they're not. I think a lot of the time it's because they're a little bit frightened. They're a bit concerned about if they start listening more or asking more questions, what's that going to do? Actually, what it does is it creates greater connection, greater belonging, and enables you to move forward. So I'm seeing that there's been a bit of a loss of sight on fundamentals. People are realizing that different people have come back into the workplace. Employees' expectations have changed. And I'm seeing a lot of organizations sort of scrambling a bit, not quite sure how to deal with those. And we're seeing that by taking it back to the basics and the fundamentals of alignment, belonging, and clarity, it's actually possible to, get things back on track and get back to having an organization which is a little bit easier to run than it has been as a result of the pandemic.
From the employee side, what are the kind of where we are and, trends kind of, again, we'll talk about future in a little bit, from where we've been to where we are right now. What do they see as the big disconnects? Is it that, you talk about feeling cared for, or, are they not aligned because they don't understand the vision that hasn't been communicated? Do they not feel cared for? Is there not clarity? Do you see trends in, kind of where employees are?
Yeah, and different sectors have different challenges. But one of the things that has happened as a result of technology and the journey we've come on recently is the visibility to employees of what else is out there, right? And they had time to reflect. Okay, a lot of time to reflect. And so, before the pandemic, and it's still true, everyone was talking about, there were no ends of articles from all the visionaries and the business leaders about the importance of purpose, right? And so many stats around how purpose-driven organizations thrive because employees are searching for meaning. So they want to work for an organization where there is a purpose. And as a result of the pandemic, that's come far more up the list as well. And so organizations had a conversation this morning about leadership that is still stuck in the pre-pandemic era, that thinks a paycheck is enough, can't stop the people getting out the door because a paycheck isn't enough. And I know that we have this sort of a carousel thing going at the moment, all this job mobility, and some businesses offering crazy money just to get new talent in. And, I saw a great article the other day about the great resignations becoming the great regret because all these employees that jump ship are suddenly realizing the grass is not actually greener. Okay. We're going to get some stability. It's a pain right now, but it's a no-win game just trying to buy talent. Actually, what you've got to do is shift the game to meaning, belonging, caring, but doing it in a structured and considered way, because that's what employees are actually really looking for. And people that are doing that are doing the job interviews are finding that that's what's getting them back in through the door.
So do you think the people who are focused on in-person versus work at home, are they missing it, that's not the most important thing because it's still the sense of belonging, and that's maybe one way to show it or not show it? Or
I'm guilty of this. You can't stop the tide going in and out, right? So I think it's foolish to sit there with resistance about trying to say, we're not going to have work from home. I mean, we're growing really fast right now. As a business, we are hiring, which is in the process of looking to hire approximately 20 people fundamentally on the sales side of our business. And I'm really passionate about culture, and we've got an incredible culture, and I love having the team in the office, and we have a great business family. And so I'm going out to the market and I'm saying I'd like the sales talent that we're recruiting, I'd like them in the office 3 days a week. I can't get people in 3 days a week. So either I have a choice. I either say, well, okay, my accountability in the business is culture. So I'm having to rethink how I shift things so that I can go where the market is, because the market that's where it is. People, don't want to come into the office 3 days a week for the type of roles we're hiring. And so we already shifted way before this to a business that measures outputs rather than inputs. I don't care what hours people do, how many times they pick up the phone, whatever. It's all based on, they have clear accountabilities, 90-day mountaintops, a midpoint check-in. And, we're working with grown-ups, and they connected to our purpose. They feel a sense of belonging. And so how they do their work, some people are night owls, other people are morning larks. We don't really mind. So as long as they can be present, focused and energized, that's our definition of engaged, with the meetings that need to happen where people need to be together. So like you, we use technology a lot, and I've had to shift my thinking rather than fight it. The tide's going in and out. I can't change that. So how can I adapt so that our business can thrive in this new era where remote working fundamentally is going to become the norm for a significant number of roles in a significant number of sectors where you don't need to be in person.
Any tips for how you keep and build on a thriving culture when people aren't in person as much?
You need to have your cornerstones really in place and strong. So for us, that is a very strong purpose that we regularly reflect on and talk about. Values, every every 45 days, each of our employees and team members scores themselves on against the values, and their line manager scores them against the values too. So they're getting regular feedback on how they live the values. We also are very crystal clear on our vision as a business. Everyone is connected to where the business is focused on being in 36 months' time. It's discussed at every meeting. We have monthly meetings, quarterly meetings. Everything is referenced back to that. We have a people charter, which is in the kit that we're going to provide. Latin word charter means a series of rights or obligations. So it's what we as employers have as a series of obligations to create the conditions where those rights are able to be lived out by our employees. How they have a right to feel when they're working with this organization, whether it's in the office or whether it's from home. And then having a regular and consistent, not erratic way of communicating with team members that gives them the clarity that they need to understand how they can best perform in their roles. Part of this is what you do. And also them having the ability to provide feedback, and for there to be that alignment in terms of the organization's direction, what's working, what's not, and the actions that are being taken, so that even if they're working remotely, we can still feel connected rather than disconnected.
There's obviously what you do is employee feedback, and have that system. And you just talked about that. And that's a key part you're saying basically of, hey, to have that thriving culture and build on it, you need to know what your employees are thinking. They need to know what you're thinking and the vision. Any general framework for how to get that done? I mean, yes, use Engagement Multiplier, and we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of Engagement Multiplier. But even without that, or even with that, like, it's a great tool, but it can be used well and it can be used not as well. What are some tips for, the way you communicate with people to do that?
Well, it's interesting you say, just to pick up on a point there. Our business has always operated on the principle, as you know, of deliver value first without any strings attached, and provide people with the ability to make meaningful difference in their businesses. So what we did ahead of today was we've created an ABC toolkit for your listeners that literally step by step gives them the ability to review and focus on the vision, the values, the purpose. There's even a guide to how you create a purpose, how you create a people charter, and the types of things that you can do to listen and communicate more effectively. And we have an entirely complementary engagement assessment that they can take using our technology. There's absolutely no strings attached, that will give them the baseline data that they can then act upon what's in the guide, and they will make meaningful progress on those areas without having to engage with us commercially. So just for clarity, we've created that because we wanted listeners today to get some value. We've been using this for some time now, and it's really effective. So I'd love to hear feedback from anyone that engages with it. And if you want any help, our team are here to support you. So on an ongoing basis then, so that sort of gets you started. On an ongoing basis, if you're not using our technology, which we've created it to make it easy to have that two-way dialogue and anonymous communication, you need to create a communication structure that works for your team. The best way to create a communication structure that works for your team is to ask them what they'd like.
Sometimes people use it as a criticism when they say, oh, well, that's not new. And I tend to say, thank you. You're right, because it's not about coming up with new stuff that no one's ever thought of before. Most of the time, it's getting back to, we know what works. The problem is keeping at it and executing on that stuff. And well, the keeping at it is keeping it in sight, because there are a lot of shiny objects that, get us off track. There are a lot of problems that pop up that we think, well, we have to attack that problem, but that problem, it's almost the opposite of a shiny object. It's more like a stinky object or something. But so you deal with those negative things instead of focusing on the positive, what really needs to get done to drive long-term success. But
I like the shiny and the stinky object analogy. I think that's very rare, especially for us high quick starts. But I think you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, I've had the conversation too many times with myself and with my team about, we used to do that and it was so effective, but we stopped doing it. It's so you have to make it part of your ongoing operation system. But one of the things that when we do a complementary engagement assessment for clients, and this is how we work with all clients, one of the things that often comes out is that communication isn't scored very highly by the employees. And so we've had extensive experience of this. And by far the best way is to then go back to the team members and ask them the type of information they would like, what frequency would they like it, why is it important to them. Just, it's that Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, seek first to understand before being understood, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that order. So dive a bit deeper. If your employees are saying communication isn't as good as it could be, ask them why and get some specifics around what's needed when and so on. And every time I've seen this done by our clients, they're getting a different perspective to the perspective the leaders had. So we'd had a leadership meeting, so communication needs to be improved. And I've seen organizations do this. They go and sit in a room and the leaders all come up with a strategy for communication. So why have you done all that, right? Why didn't you go and ask them first? And I think we need to remember that there's huge wisdom and insight in the minds of our employees and team members who are doing the jobs, they're frontline, And if only you take the time to ask and understand, you'll get pearls. And quite often it's that Japanese Kaizen principle. You layer up 200 changes in your business, which incidentally is really, really easy over the next 12 months that are all very small, easy to implement. They've been suggested by your team members. You stick all those together and stack them up. And you look back in 12 months' time at how your organization has transformed in terms of performance. And we spend too much time as leaders focusing on revolution rather than revolution, right? We just need to actually listen, understand from them, and then implement. So yes, back to the point, ask them what they would like in terms of communication if it's not where it is, and they will tell you.
Yeah, and then you have to act on it, as you're kind of implying / saying. It's, get your strategy, ask them. But, I see so many times when people ask employees or others, just what's important to you, and they listen, they hear it, but then nothing changes. I mean, I think that changing the way you're operating, changing the way you're dealing with people as individuals and as groups inside your organization.
Yeah,
we forget that step sometimes.
Yeah, I think we're now at the point in business where you used to be able to get away with that. Organizations did. Many organizations did. They'd ask for feedback, and we sometimes see it on these complimentary assessments. One of the questions we ask is, how did taking this make you feel? We see this. We sometimes see nothing's going to change. We've been here before, right? We see it far more than we'd like. And the warning shot to businesses that get that comment is, if you don't start taking action now, you're going to have a problem because job mobility is so easy. People are there now, but they won't be there if you carry on not acting on the inside. And why would you not?
So, you were talking about evolution rather than revolution, and making those smaller step kind of changes. But you're 9 in quick start. How do you do that? Like, how do you run an organization that does that rather than kind of the big, oh my gosh, we're going to start something brand new? Because that's your MO, and that's mine a little bit too, is that initiating quick start, I'm going to come up with something new and it's going to change the way we do business. But you're also saying that's not always the way to run a business.
No, and in working with Colby and in having sort of learned a lot from far wiser people than we are, we've got to the point now where we have strategies and structures that help us effectively work with those MOs. And so I'll give you an example. My team are very much aware of my 9, okay? And that it creates a huge sense of urgency because suddenly I can see it really clearly. Let's go, So I now know that if I'm dealing with, for example, David, our technology director, who has a high fact find, I know that if I'm going to have a harmonious meeting with David, I need to make sure that I acknowledge that before I go in, so I can make sure that I give him what he needs in terms of the information, rather than me just saying it's going to be simple and easy. I don't always get it right, by the way, and if David's listening to this, who I know will be laughing. But where I've chosen to focus is by, when you know your MO, the ABC is a great example. So you used the word at the beginning of this, which I thought really caught my attention, which was visionary. And I don't know whether you've done any work with EOS.
Yep, we have. We run on EOS.
Okay. So ever since my team suggested that that's where I spend my time living, I can operate in my MO, and I find it much, much easier. So looking at the challenges that are faced by businesses right now, and using my unique ability, I ended up coming up with a structure and framework that was as easy as ABC, and everyone was singing the Jackson song, and getting into the position where we could create a structure and framework that would make. So I saw that very clearly from the start. And then what I was able to do is work with the unique abilities in our team to get it down from, and we use Dan Sullivan's impact filter all the time, so someone with a 9 quick start, what's the purpose, the importance, the ideal outcome, the success criteria, and then sit down with a team that can then take care of those things that otherwise make me feel like it's not going fast enough.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. We need to do the same things. And I think a lot of it, well, I want to go back. One of the things that I was thinking of, you were talking about how businesses can't get away with kind of not listening or not reacting in a positive way to what they hear from their team members. Command and control organizations are still a thing, but there's so many fewer of them around than there used to be. I mean, that was the dominant model for business structures in the 50s, 60s, 70s, probably, I mean, maybe dominant even into the 80s. But yeah, I think that fewer and fewer people are willing to just sit back and be controlled as employees. They know that they're valuable and they can go somewhere else, and they will, and they do.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, those organizations those that are left won't be around for long, I don't think. One of the things that we were talking about a couple of months ago that suddenly occurred to me was, you're familiar with the SAS, Special Air Services, yep. So UK elite military force, highly secretive. Their motto is "Who dares wins," and it got me thinking about how the business leaders and owners on this call can actually frame, because it's very easy if you can frame things to remember them. And so dare, not in the context of the SAS, but dare in business now is the way forward. So it's going to be daring leaders and daring businesses that succeed. And dare stands for define, ask, refine, engage. And I've rapidly realized over the last 90 days how powerful this is as a very simple approach, that in business, we sort of define a vision, or we define a purpose, okay? Or we define a people charter. And we then go to our team and we ask them, based on a structure and a framework, how they feel about what's there, and we get their feedback. And then we refine what we thought, because it needs to be relevant. And once we then end up with some collaboration, but this is not chaos, because you are starting with a structure and framework from the top of the organization, okay, that's taking things forward. And then once you've refined what you're doing, you engage the team with it and move forward. And it's so simple, but it's so effective, so effective. And that's the opposite of command and control, right? So what you're actually doing is you're involving them, but you're starting with a structure first. And the whole process of that guide I referenced earlier, every single step is dare. So here's how you define, here's how you ask, here's how you refine, here's how you then engage.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what you see moving forward. Are things going to change, or is it more a question of always getting back to fundamentals? What do you see for the way businesses are operating and what employees, team members are expecting or looking for?
Well, the answer is yes and yes. So things are going to change. And I think that it's really important that we get back to fundamentals, because, depending on who you listen to, I watch the news with horror at the moment. The war in Ukraine concerns me greatly. I don't know where that's going. I look at the degree of uncertainty that is caused by that. I look at, economists and market experts talking about, are we heading for a recession, right? And so it's unsettling, isn't it? And I mean, enough already. We had the pandemic, and that was enough for a decade, and now we've got this. So just being objective about it, now is the time, if ever there was one, to take stock and really do take a long, hard look at the fundamentals, because the fundamentals are what will see you through the months and the years ahead if they are challenging. If you don't get a grasp on those fundamentals, then I think the business is going to be vulnerable, because there are many organizations that are, and employees are going to continue to be aware of what else is in the market. They're going to continue to be searching for purpose, organizations that have a meaningful why. And they're also going to be searching for organizations where they can feel a sense of belonging. And I've seen business leaders in so many different diverse sectors. We look after over 73 different business sectors. People like, manufacturing nuts and bolts that are able to create a why and a sense of belonging. So it's not, I don't want anyone listening to this going, oh yeah, it's okay for them, they've got a sexy business. It doesn't matter. You can do it in any business, in any sector. You just have to think carefully. One quick example, 3 men digging a ditch, right? Once you say to one, what are you doing? He says, digging a ditch. Second one, laying foundations. Third one, building a cathedral, right? So same job. So it is possible to do in any sector. And it's actually quite easy. So I think both are true. We're into a period of unprecedented working practices where there'll be an element of work from home, hybrid for organizations that can do it. So you need to be able to measure outputs rather than inputs. And then you need to have some of those fundamentals and those structures and frameworks in place to be able to run your business effectively. And actually, it's interesting. There's so much opportunity if you think about it, because there's things now that you can do that you couldn't do before. And there's people you can hire now who previously you wouldn't have hired because they weren't near enough. Now it doesn't matter so much. So with the right mindset, it does open up opportunities for the right organizations.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a question that might stump you, I'll admit, but it's a question that's fascinated me more and more, largely because we help people understand their cognitive strengths. We know that there's advice that's helpful because it fits you and who you are. And then there's advice that it's offered, it's well-meaning, it worked for the person who's giving it, but it really doesn't fit you. Can you think of times in your career or your life, it doesn't just have to be business, where somebody that you trusted, respected, gave you advice, you followed it, and then somewhere after that you figured out, wow, that was not good advice for me, that, I shouldn't have listened, even though, again, it was well-meaning, somebody you trusted, admired. Can you think of anything?
Yeah. I remember we opened this by talking about Peter Diamandis. I remember going to Peter Diamandis' very first Abundance 360 workshop in LA. And this is a long time ago. And I was blown away by just what he was showing us there about how the future was going to look. This is before we were even talking about electric cars and, driverless cars and stuff that now is all existing. And he advised me to buy $10,000 worth of Bitcoin and hold it for at least 10 years. In fact, he told the whole audience to do that. Okay. I came back to the office and I spoke to my financial advisor and he told me it was a really bad idea. Okay. So that was one of the worst pieces of advice I've ever taken.
In not buying it, obviously.
Yeah. I did. I took his advice.
Yeah, and for perspective, since Bitcoin has crashed, if you had bought it 7 years ago, it wouldn't look so much like a crash.
Exactly. I mean, even now, I'd still be reasonably happy, I think, with that investment.
Yeah,
right?
I'm sure it's gone up 1,000-fold from when that advice was given. Bad from 18 months ago, but again, broaden your time horizon, and it's a different deal. But it's interesting. So finally, any thoughts on? And you've talked about it some, but since this is a Colby Corp podcast, your MO, not just your 9 and quick start, although that's, you initiate action by innovating, coming up with new stuff. That's a huge part of who you are. But any other thoughts on how your cognitive strengths and understanding them has helped you to get where you are in business?
Absolutely. One of the biggest insights for me wasn't actually really my 9 quick start. It was actually my follow through. Very quickly after I got my Colby score and had it explained to me, which was 14, 15 years ago now, I started doing that with the team in building a unique ability team around me, in particular, Jane, who I've worked with for that period of time. She's an 8 follow through. Okay. So what it's enabled me to do is this appreciating how people are wired and not feeling frustrated with somebody because they don't act as we would like them to act because of their MO. and actually making it okay to be who you are, but then thinking from a business perspective, how can we put a team together that has complementary MOs and can help really drive the business forward. I think that's been a huge breakthrough for us. And I remember doing an exercise with Shannon Waller with the entire team about looking at all their MOs and seeing where everyone sat and how we could then subsequently think about any blind spots we might have in our team and where we should hire. And so it's almost like a secret superpower, right? Just having that information. And then the fact that, everyone, it makes things that could otherwise be sometimes get a bit out of hand, a bit serious, laughable, right? When I'm creating a sense of urgency, but no, it's, and quick start again, it's okay.
I love that your answer gets back to what you do. So, I ask most people that question, and and the question's about that person. That's the way I ask it, and it's the way I asked you. So they talk about, well, here's what it's meant for me, but your business is all about looking beyond just you. So sure enough, your answer was, it was figuring out how to work with everybody around me. It wasn't just about you and the way you do your stuff. So I love that your answer fits what you do and how you've been successful, not just with your own MO, but in the way you operate with people. And, I'll just say, and I've told you this before, but I'll say thank you to you for coming up with Engagement Multiplier, because we've been using it here at Colby for about 5 years. I think we used a lot of the principles beforehand, but in terms of using the software, and it has made a huge difference in understanding what are people actually thinking, not just what they want to tell you. If you ask a question at a staff meeting, that's not really enough. And that those answers are going to be skewed based on the way you set up the question and what the vibe of the room is, and people aren't always comfortable. So, having a tool and a process and a whole, the system that people get comfortable with. And I will say for our team, it took them a little while to really get comfortable with, can I really tell you what I truly believe when you ask these questions? And it's not going to come back and bite me in the butt. But they learn that. I mean, number one, it's anonymous. Number two, our culture is, one of our core values is we're always improving. And you can't always improve if you don't accept, not just ask for, but accept tough criticism. So for us, in starting with me and my co-leader, Amy Bruschi, we ask the questions and we have to listen to them and think about them, get better, because we got that feedback. And Engagement Multipliers really helped us do that, because people are comfortable giving their input. We've gotten better at asking good questions. That's another thing. Engagement Multiplier gives you a bunch you can use, but then you can do customized questions. And we've gotten better at customizing questions to what's going on. We get feedback and we realize, we need to go a little bit deeper on something that we've heard about. Let's ask some more questions. And sometimes they're open-ended. Sometimes they're, score it 1 through 5, and you can, get trends, and you can do those over time and see, are we getting better? Are we getting worse? So anyway, thank you and your team for coming up with that, because it's made a big difference in the way we operate. And, I think during the pandemic, talk about a sense of purpose and belonging. I think it was almost easy at first, because there's that notion of fighting a collective enemy. And so it was difficult. People were scared, people were worried, are we going to lose our jobs? But you also had that common purpose of, wow, we've got to band together. We've got to work hard so that we can get through this and do really well. But as you come out of it and you lose that, and I'm glad we're losing that negative sense of, wow, we're so threatened that we have to hunker down and we're a cohesive team now because we have to be. Now those potentials are opening up in terms of people can go other places. But if you just relied on that as your sense of purpose and that goes away, well, you got to replace it with something. Now, for us, we had a purpose beforehand. Our purpose is to help people understand their instinctive strengths so that they can achieve the things they care about more easily, more effectively, and then accomplish more and more and more. So yeah, that's a long way of saying thanks. Engagement Multipliers helped us achieve our mission and our purpose. So
thank you. You're a pleasure to work with, as always. And You're right. The pandemic gave a lot of organizations a temporary purpose, which was getting through the pandemic. And you're absolutely right. Organizations that are coming out of this now and haven't got something meaningful in place that they can connect their employees to, that in their employees' opinion is a great purpose, not just in the leadership's opinion, it's a great purpose. Those organizations are suffering because people will they're looking for more meaning. They will look elsewhere.
Well, Stefan, great to see you. Great to talk with you. Thanks for doing this, and look forward to talking with you again. For our listeners, if you got to this on our podcast page, if you got to it on YouTube, there's a link you can get to our podcast page for Powered by Instinct. We will have a link to Stefan's tool that he talked about, but Stefan, I know they can get to it directly.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about two things today, really. Well, we've been doing a lot of things, but two fundamental. We're talking about Kolbe and we're talking about ABC. So the URL is kolbeabc.com. Really simple, easy to remember. So yes, if you go to kolbeabc.com, you can download the ABC toolkit that has all the resources in it we've spoken about today. And there's also details there for you to be able to make contact with our team so that they can set you up with a complimentary engagement assessment and then help you and your leaders to take action on the toolkit to help get your business in a place where the fundamentals are all there, not just in your opinion, but in the opinion of the minds of your employees, which is what matters.
Great. Well, thank you again for making that available to all the listeners. I appreciate it. And I'd encourage you guys who are listening to try it out. As Stefan said, there's no obligation. At a minimum, it'll be really interesting. Hopefully you'll keep on it and take action on it. But even if that's all you do, it'll be helpful. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Stefan. Great to talk to you. And
thank you very much. Yeah,
everybody else, join us again for another Powered by Instinct soon.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Powered by Instinct. This show is brought to you by Kolbe Corp, a company that helps leaders and organizations thrive using the only instinctive strengths assessment on the market. If you enjoyed this episode, then follow Powered by Instinct wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or join us online at kolbe.com/podcast for all the latest episodes.